Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit, and welcome once again to the Steam sale. They've changed a few things around this time, and the Steam sale will run until December the 1st, 10 a.m. Pacific. Now, Steam sales usually work a particular way. They usually have deals of the day, which are heavier discounts than the regular discounts, and they also have flash sales, which generally stick around for a little while and then disappear. Now, the advice that I've been giving people for the Steam sales the last couple of years has always been the same. Wait for a daily deal or a flash sale, because it is possible the discount can go deeper. However, things have now changed because they're, of course, offering refunds. And the last thing you want to do is have a bunch of people buy the game, it then get cheaper, and then they demand refunds. That would be a little bit intense, I think, for Valve to deal with, and I believe that that is why they have decided to change the way that Steam sales now work. There are no longer deeper discounts. The discounts will be the same throughout the entire sale, which makes things easier in some respects, and it also makes it a hell of a lot more difficult to actually find what the best deals are, because usually they were front and center. Now, there's about 8,000 discounts. I've got to dig through them, and I've got to change my format around a little bit. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a couple of videos on this Steam sale. The first one, this one, is going to be what I view as the top 20 in no particular order deals on Steam right now. Now, these can vary from AAA titles all the way down to little indies. It really comes down to how good I feel the game is and taking into account how deep a discount it has. So it may not be the best game on Steam, but if it has an incredibly good discount and means that it's a very good value proposition, then it's probably getting mentioned in this list. There's no doubt some that I've missed because, as I said, there's 8,000 bloody discounts, and I've tried to boil them down to 20. The second video that I'm going to try and do tomorrow is going to be a list of hidden gems, stuff that's very, very, very cheap, but maybe isn't listed on the front page because it's kind of obscure. So they won't be the best games, but they'll be incredibly cheap. So if you've got to spare $5 and want to get 6 video games for it, that will be the video for you. I'm going to list all the games today by their percentage discount, which does not necessarily mean that that is the percentage of the full price. Indeed, it can be a percentage of a lowered price, which is what makes a lot of these games incredible value. So, in no particular order, let's begin with Wolfenstein: The New Order, 85% off. That is a very deep discount on a game that is not that old and was my favorite game of 2014. That alone should be a good reason to look at this. Indeed, The New Order is actually cheaper than The Old Blood, the standalone expansion for that game, the DLC, which in my opinion was nowhere near as good. This is, I think, one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest discount I've seen on this game so far, and what you get out of Wolfenstein: The New Order is an incredibly good single-player shooter. It's got a great story, if a little cheesy. It's got some very well-developed characters, surprisingly so. It's got replayability, excellent gunplay, and great level design. There aren't all that many dedicated single-player shooters that come out these days, and Wolfenstein: The New Order is an incredibly good one that I would strongly recommend to anybody that would like between 10 to 12 hours of Nazi shooting fun. Just bear in mind, it's an id Tech 5 engine game. id Tech 5 has its own little eccentricities, such as a lock to 60 frames per second, which is a little unfortunate, and it has some issues on AMD graphics cards, so just bear that in mind. South Park: The Stick of Truth, 75% off. This is an irreverent and extremely offensive RPG that is well worth picking up if you're, of course, a fan of the South Park franchise. It looks exactly like South Park, which is surprising. It's incredibly difficult to nail that aesthetic down, but they did it. It is surprisingly funny, actually, and I'm not the world's biggest South Park fan. Of course, it is full of some really lowbrow humor as well, but it's got quite a lot of customization, shockingly enough. Not only can you make your own character in the South Park style, but the amount of equipment customization and tinkering that you can do in this game is really quite enjoyable. It has a neat little battle system and plenty to explore, as well as an amusing storyline, so I would certainly recommend giving that a look for that price. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, 75% off. This is a discount of a discount, which is why this is worthwhile, and in my opinion, this is one of the best Assassin's Creed games to come out of the last few years, simply because half of it is barely an Assassin's Creed game. Going sailing on the high seas, upgrading your ship, and creating a fleet is certainly a very enjoyable thing to do, and when it does force you to go back to the Assassin's Creedy bits, at least it is nicely paced and spaced out thanks to a bunch of very cool side activities involving exploration and all that sort of thing. It is a lot of fun, and I would certainly recommend it, and it also has the multiplayer mode, which is nice. I rather like Assassin's Creed multiplayer. Unfortunately, they decided not to include it in the games after that, so perhaps pick up a Black Flag for that price. Left 4 Dead 2, 80% off. This game is still played. This game is incredibly cheap for what it offers in terms of its content, and it is worthy of a look if for some reason you don't already own it. The only thing I'd say about this discount is they've done the same thing for the past few years, and pretty much every sale imaginable has some sort of big Left 4 Dead discount, but that's not to say that Left 4 Dead 2 isn't still worth picking up if for some reason you don't already own it. The co-op zombie shooting experience, particularly in the versus mode, has a great deal of longevity and is worthy of your time. The Bioshock Triple Pack, 85% off. The Bioshock games are heavily discounted on a regular basis, but I think for all three, this is a pretty good bet. I mean, both Bioshock and Bioshock 2 are classics. I personally was not a great fan of Bioshock Infinite, but I am also aware that I'm very much in the minority on that, and certainly for the price bundled with the other two, if you haven't had a chance to experience Bioshock yet, then this would be a great time to do just that. If you want to pick up DLC, Minerva's Den is also heavily discounted, and I would highly recommend that for Bioshock 2. For Infinite, you can avoid Clash in the Clouds, and you can just pick up Burial at Sea Episode 1 and 2. You will get a slight discount if you pick up the Season Pass rather than buying those episodes individually. It does come with Clash in the Clouds, which is a waste of your time, but Burial at Sea is a really good piece of standalone DLC. The Witcher 2 Enhanced Edition, 85% off. This is a frequent discount, but still a worthwhile one for those who have perhaps ignored the Witcher series up to this point. I mean, the amount of content that you get for a mere $3 with the Assassins of Kings Enhanced Edition is just ludicrous. And if you've become perhaps interested in the Witcher series as a result of Witcher 3, Witcher 2 very much still stands up to scrutiny. You know, it's still a great-looking game, it still plays really, really well. Whereas the original Witcher is perhaps not quite as enjoyable these days and certainly has its flaws. I would recommend this wholeheartedly to anyone that wants a nice in-depth RPG, and the amount of extra content they've tacked on with an Enhanced Edition is absolutely phenomenal. Just Cause 2, 75% off. Nice little bargain for a really enjoyable game. Of course, Just Cause 3 is out in a few days. This is an ideal time to play catch-up with a game that still looks great. I mean, it looked great when it came out. It still looks great now, and your PC's probably a little bit better to run it. DLC-wise, you don't really need to worry too much about that because none of it's really worthwhile. But I have to say, I am very, very impressed with Just Cause 2. It's a lot of fun if you're looking for an open-world game that's all about causing chaos. And of course, it has a thriving mod scene, which is well worth a look as well. The Stanley Parable, 80% off. If you were a little concerned that this game wouldn't have enough content to justify the price tag, considering that it is a relatively short and fairly non-interactive title, then I can understand that, but now that it's 80% off, I don't think there's really any excuse not to try out this particular walking simulator, as they call it, but damn what a good walking simulator it is. Exceptional comedy, great narration, awesome storytelling, and a huge amount of hidden stuff to find within this particular title. For $3, there's no real excuse anymore. Rogue Legacy, 85% off. Not a game that I personally enjoyed a huge amount, but I know a lot of people really played the hell out of this, and this is a roguelite action platformer in which every death furthers your bloodline and your legacy as you gradually build up your holdings over the course of a number of generations, which unlock more content, and you slowly progress through an extremely punishing, randomly generated set of levels. This is a nice little cheap title for those looking for a good few hours of frustrating entertainment. Dishonored, 75% off. Now, you do have the Game of the Year edition available, but to me that's not quite as good value as just buying Dishonored on its own, considering the level of discount that Dishonored on its own actually has. The Game of the Year edition is more than double that price, and while I have to say that some of the DLC is very good, such as the Knife of Dunwall and the Brigmore Witches, if you haven't picked up Dishonored before, it's perfectly good on its own, and for that price it's very difficult to justify not owning it. It is, for the most part, a first-person stealth action game, or you can just shoot everybody. It's about assassination in a rather cool steampunk little world, and as far as I'm concerned, it is absolutely wonderful, very immersive and extremely enjoyable. For that price, it is a bargain. Saints Row 4 Game of the Century Edition, 70% off. Doesn't sound like a big discount, but if you look at the actual price, then I think you can probably see why I'm recommending it. It's It's only $1 or your regional equivalent or so more than the game on its own, and comes with quite a lot of DLC. It is not the ultimate franchise pack, certainly, but it does come with a good amount of content. Basically, the Game of the Century Edition comes with all the DLC for Saints Row 4, which is of mixed quality, but for an extra $1, it's absolutely worth picking up. If you have avoided the superhero-inspired gangster madness of Saints Row 4 up to this point, then perhaps this might be the time to indulge. The Banner Saga, 75% off. So this is essentially a tactics game with a little bit of choose-your-own-adventure layered over the top of it, with a wonderful art style set in a mythological Viking world. It does have a little bit of an abrupt ending, which is perhaps the issue that I've got with it, but outside of that, it's a very enchanting and surprisingly in-depth tactics game, so I would recommend having a look at it. Knights of the Old Republic, 70% off. This is a bargain for a classic. Both of the Knights of the Old Republic games are actually available on sale, and I'm gonna be that guy that says that number 2 was better. I know, that's contrarian as hell, most people don't really believe that, but what I will say is that KOTOR 2 actually got a huge update, which updated its compatibility with modern systems, as well as put in Steam Workshop support and allowed you to play the restored content mod right from the get-go. If you've not played this game yet, now might be the time. It's incredibly in-depth, it's extremely enjoyable. I would strongly recommend both of them, and they don't exactly cost all that much, so prepare to dive into some great Star Wars action that isn't Battlefront. The Metro Redux bundle, 75% off. This is a stupidly good deal for 2 stupidly good games, and the updated versions of them as well, if you can really believe that. Both of these are phenomenally immersive, extremely atmospheric first-person shooters, and Metro 2033 Redux actually updated the game quite significantly, made it run better, really fixed some of the problems that game had. These are both great. They're still some of the best looking games on PC, as I said, incredibly atmospheric and well worthy of your time. And also the Redux bundle happens to include the Ranger mode, which was unfortunately paid DLC in the previous versions of the game, and that's an even more immersive and very hardcore mode that's worthy of your time. Check these out, really. If you've been avoiding them up to this point, I do have to ask you why, because they're both incredible games. Transistor, 75% off. Love this game, one of my favorite games of 2014. A relatively short experience, which is perhaps why some people have been avoiding it at its launch price, but at 75% off, I don't think there's much of an excuse. It takes you about 4 or 5 hours to beat. It certainly has plenty of replayability as far as I'm concerned with the New Game Plus mode, and it is a rather innovative action RPG with a really interesting planning system, which means that the game's a little bit of a mix of turn-based and real-time action. It's beautiful, it sounds great, it plays great, awesome story, and well worth the low asking price of admission. Also, the soundtrack's discounted too, I'd recommend that. Antichamber, 90% off, huge discount. Now, if you had any doubts about this game, understandably so, because it is very strange and certainly not even the kind of game that I would generally enjoy, 90% off discount should convince you otherwise. It's a first-person puzzle game of sorts. Don't think it's like Portal, because it ain't. It's a mind-bending game that challenges you to throw away your preconceptions and think differently. It's amazing, and for $2, or whatever the regional equivalent happens to be, you might as well give it a try. Serious Sam 3, 90% off. If you just want some dumb shooting, that's what Serious Sam 3 is. Shoot through hordes of enemies with big guns. It's unbelievably silly, and it is certainly worthy of that price, no real doubt about that. The multiplayer is unfortunately pretty much dead, although it is worth bearing in mind that the DLC, which is also 90% off, the Jewel of the Nile, is worth picking up. This is a game in which you can turn your brain off and blow some stuff up. It's as simple as that, and when it does that, it does it very well, and thankfully, it does that all the time. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, 85% off. You will never get me to stop talking about this game. It's what I would consider now my favorite game of all time, narrowly edging out the original Deus Ex. It's a little game, it's a small game, it's 2 to 3 hours long, and it's perfect length as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people, again, have expressed the concern that, considering the price tag, it's not worth the money. At a discount, I don't think you've got much of an excuse. It's a game that's very unique in terms of storytelling, and it really communicates to the player in a fundamentally different way to the vast majority of other titles. It integrates the UI and the way that you control the game directly into the way that it's trying to communicate the feelings that you should be feeling and elements of the story and the emotional twists and turns of the characters. It's a very unique proposition to me, and I would recommend it. I would say you're probably better off playing with a 360 pad. It is playable with the keyboard, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it over the 360 pad simply because it's designed to be played with 2 analog sticks, 1 stick controlling each brother. Well worth it for the price, no doubt about it. Brutal Legend, 90% off. Not a brilliant PC port for this one, and a game that quite a few people actually didn't enjoy, but I'm one of the people that will stand by Brutal Legend to the death, because to me it is a very interesting melding of genres. Not only that, but of course I'm a huge heavy metal fan, and this game is a love letter to those that enjoy heavy metal. Great soundtrack, obviously, as you would expect, and a really odd mix of open world action with some sort of third-person strategy elements that come into play later down the line. I think I enjoyed it because it reminded me of Sacrifice, a game that I very much loved from Shiny Entertainment, and Brutal Legend for this price is worth getting through the problems, I think. And last but by no means least, this list being in no particular order, This War of Mine, 66% off. This is a game that will make you feel feels. This is a game that looks at war from a very different perspective, and it's essentially a management and crafting game with some stealth elements. It's got a great look to it, an amazing aesthetic as far as I'm concerned. It's about surviving, not as a soldier, but as a civilian in a war-torn world. What decisions do you make for your own survival? Do you turn those asking for help away, or do you share your limited resources? How long can you survive? It's a really great game, and it takes quite a lot out of you emotionally. You know, it's a game that wears you down. It's quite surprising in that regard, and I think that it did a great job of communicating the aspects of war that we generally don't see in video games. It's a fundamentally different look at it, and it executes it really well while being a very compelling and a very thoughtful experience that actually requires a lot of work on your part in order to stay alive. It's a tricky game, certainly. It's a very punishing game. It makes you think. It's very much a game that proves the old axiom that I've been hammering on for years, is that games don't have to be fun, they have to be compelling in some way. Just as television doesn't have to be fun, books don't have to be fun. This is a compelling game. This is a game that is satisfying to play, that you're going to get a lot out of. It's not necessarily fun in the traditional sense, but it's definitely challenging and rewarding to play. Alright folks, that wraps me up. That is about 20 of the best deals that I could find in the 8,000 or so discount on Steam. If you want to check out more games that I enjoy and see whether or not they actually have a discount on them, well, you can check out the Cynical Brit Gaming Steam Curator, the #1 Steam curator on the service. I've got a list of about 154 games on there, all of which I very much enjoyed, and linked, of course, to the videos on that particular subject. So if you want to check that list out, that's a list of games that I don't think suck, and some of them may very well be heavily discounted, so it's worth looking through that. Just head on over to my Steam group. I'll put a link in the description below this video so that you can see my big list of Steam-curated games. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to click the like button, and if you did not, then the dislike button is right next to it. I'll see you next time.